Well, hi everyone. Today I'm with a friend of mine who is going to give us a very interesting perspective on audit from a cybersecurity perspective, and it's something I really want the world to hear about. But may I introduce Alex Stangl. Alex is global head of audit for Ion Group. And we've been discussing over a number of coffees a very interesting set of approaches to this, which I'd like to draw out today. But Alex, before we begin, can you just give us a quick background so everyone knows where you're coming from and what your journey's been, please?
Yeah, hi everyone, and hi Dan. Really appreciate having this conversation with you today. Brief intro from my side. I'm now with Ion Group for more than 12 years, overlooking all of the audit activities for Ion, basically managing the external audits on the security side, focusing on ISO 27001, SOC 1, SOC 2, but there's a bunch of other standards which are relevant for us as a leader in, let's say, basically everything that is relevant for the financial industry in terms of software solutions and automation. I'm also responsible for the internal audit process. In brief words, just to make sure that we're on the safe side before the external auditors are coming in. But of course, I think also taking a look at improvement potentials within the company, and as we are a fast-growing corporate structure driven by M&A activities, the horizon is constantly growing. So that's definitely a very interesting area of my work. Before joining Ion, I used to work also in other industries, automotive, to mention here, as well as electronic components industry. Also had some footsteps in science, actually, as I originally studied physics, geophysics. But yeah, I'm now in the industry, I guess, for more than 20 years, typically working in areas like quality management, where it all started, moving over to continuous improvement, Six Sigma, where I was used to be a master black belt in this industry. And then, piece by piece, got in touch into the audit field, and this was driven again by requirements. But I think not just limited to these requirements, also in combination with setting up new management systems, even considering myself as an architect for many, and yeah, including audit activity over time would mean, of course, also earning all of the required badges, but a lot of experience. And nowadays, I would say my audit work is on the one hand focused, of course, on mandatory requirements, compliance requirements, of course, prepping for certifications. But on the other hand, there are also certain areas which are subject, for example, to continuous improvement, to organizational development. I consider myself basically also as a business partner within the company, where I'm able to consult executives on the status quo, but also on future state decisions and architecture. So it's a pretty interesting and area, I would say, which is probably not only this kind of classical understanding what audit means and what audit should be, right?
Well, that's exactly why, when we were speaking about this approach a little while back, it intrigued me, because from a cyber perspective, one of the things we see a lot is, if you like, let's just say often group audit, global audit, whichever implementation is not always cyber's friend, and tends to take the sort of external view / critical view. And I really love your approach, Alex, because we see so many complex challenges, as and we've discussed and many times and such. But you've taken an interesting twist, which is audit. I'm going to coin it now: audit as an enabler. That is really interesting. Tell me, why have you done that? Where are the benefits of this? And what have you seen that have been great outcomes because of this approach, even though you've still got to operate within frameworks that are formal?
Well, then, I think taking a look back at, let's say, my own, let's say, first steps in the industry, first steps in my career, I quickly found out that it's not just, understanding requirements. Of course, unfortunately, I would say all of these standards have a certain downside, that there's a strict, very strict understanding, very strict interpretation, specifically for, let's say, cybersecurity. It's all about controls, right? Control frameworks, which typically require a lot of documentation, where you simply produce documentation just to satisfy the audits, and then finally you have a piece of paper on your wall, right? But my take is basically a little bit, let's say, different in terms of, understanding requirements as a very good opportunity for interpretation. And interpretation, of course, always includes the mandatory compliance requirements and their, let's say, adherence. But on the other hand, I think there's a lot of stuff that is related to opportunities for the organization, organizational development, I've already mentioned. Business process culture, which I think is still an issue in 2024. Taking a look at audits that I did over time, and you can imagine it's probably a few hundreds I did for internal audits as well as for suppliers. Understanding what's really, let's say, the mission and vision of a company, what's their interpretation into a reasonable set of business processes, as well as a corresponding control framework which goes hand in hand with these business requirements. It sounds so easy. It sounds so easy, right? But overall, I'd say that based on my observation, companies and suppliers, markets could do a better job in really taking the time doing this carefully, because in the end it would be low-hanging fruits later on when they're implementing new requirements. And taking a look at the horizon of, laws, requirements, standards, regulatory things, on a day-to-day basis, we learn that there's a lot of stuff coming around the corner. And this is not new, by the way. I mean, the whole story around supply chain management is something that existed in other industries for, let's say, decades. In cybersecurity, or let's say IT industry, even in financial industry, it took probably a little bit longer, but now it's there. And we see corresponding law, we see EU directives, we see other frameworks which are becoming mandatory. And we see there's other aspects like ESG, right? The whole stuff is not new, but it requires that, again, you have to refer to a solid set in terms of governance evidences, in terms of sustainability, in terms of environmental things. So that's not coming overnight, right? And again, I'd like also to mention in terms of, taking a look at the horizon, yeah, AI is already here. So we have to keep in mind that this will also influence compliance requirements, and therefore I think it's absolutely clear that it would be sooner or later also considered in audit work.
You've just hit on one of the points I'm noting down on my pad here, Alex, which is that kind of, I don't know, let's just call it a challenge, supply chain. And the reason I paused slightly is because, as we know now, supply chain isn't what it used to be. Supply chain has supply chain within supply chain within supply chain, and so many facets to it. So I'm going to ask a really important question around this from your perspective, and a second part, which is how do you help your organization or an organization in this? We look at the CISO forums and a number of very active places discussing exactly this now. Supply chain gets audited, and audit therefore is meant to be trusted. Can it be trusted, or are people, or is the system going against itself? Because you see so much stuff of descoped and it's on a third party, of a third party, of a third party, and off it goes. I don't know whether I'm phrasing myself particularly well here, but to summarize, supply chain has just become so opaque. It is not transparent anymore, is it? And even now we're looking. Your thoughts, and how do we do something about that? How do we bring that value back into the org?
I think that's an excellent question. You're perfectly right saying that's becoming intransparent. And I think taking a look at my own industry with software development, right, where people historically always used to have, let's say, portions of open source within their code, right?
Mm.
And over time, we've seen that there could be significant vulnerabilities hidden in code just because of the circumstance. So it just dictates, okay, you need to do a better job in understanding your own assets. And this would finally, let's say, lead to the understanding, okay, what is my supply chain? And I think where companies nowadays are lacking is their, let's say, willingness to invest in resources for supply chain management. Taking a look at other industries, to be honest, this is a pretty standard approach. As I said, for example, I have some experience in automotive industry. Nobody would discuss the topic around supply chain management. It's simply there. It's a must-have, right? In our industry, it's probably not that common still. But on the other hand, I think let's consider it as a good opportunity because it will help you to identify what's exactly relevant for your business. How is this managed? What's your business resilience related to supply chain and all of the vendors you're depending on? And specifically in our industry, where you're depending on major players, which also, let's say, limit themselves somehow to be not that transparent, right? That again, I'm referring to audit work, where typically for some of the big players, you wouldn't be allowed to go there and taking a look at the data center. I'm traveling a lot. I'm doing a lot of global on-site audit work because for me, it's so super important to take a look at literally everything behind every single door, every single room, and understanding what is going on, who's doing what, right? I can't do this virtually. I can't do a tick box exercise. I can't send out questionnaires confirming me this, right? And you want to
But on that note, that's good because an on-prem environment, you can actually, as you say, take the time, make the effort, go on site, open the door and see what's behind and the good, bad and the ugly that's there. But Alex, when we look at then cloud solutions, we can't see through that. And it's the door behind the door virtually that we also can't see. So then we depend on something that's bugging the industry. It's certainly bugging me right now, which is that's okay. We're certified. I'm not going to mention what type of certification because that's immaterial really. But people then say, that's it, we're certified, we're blah, blah, blah. How do we trust that? Because we can't then go and phone these cloud companies up. We can't audit them, and they will only release under NDA often their audit. But if you drill down into the audits, as you and I both know, all of it is outsourced, and descoped. How do we deal with that? Because it's impossible.
I would agree. It is, let's say, widely impossible because we're still lacking the standards, to be honest. If you take a look at what's out there, is still not considering, let's say, that comprehensive set of requirements, which would include, for example, a full supply chain, right? And it's, by the way, it's also debatable what's the reasonable limitation of this, right? I mean, there's a lot of question marks, but I guess you and I would fail to answer this today, right? But what I can definitely recommend is getting back to the basics, getting back to, as I said, a clear understanding of assets, manage them thoroughly, doing a thorough BIA, business impact analysis, and finding out, do you have a clear understanding what's flowing into your BCP and DR considerations? And of course, is this tested accordingly? Is it also including tests for your tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 supplies, if there are any, which also, by the way, are existing in our industry, and we shouldn't underestimate the aspect of contractors, which potentially would fall under the same consideration, right? So that's really a very, let's say, interesting field on the one hand, but absolutely challenging. And I think you don't need to be a clairvoyant and say, okay, what's coming up next in the, let's say, until 2030 or something like this. One thing's for sure, from my point of view, that the pressure on thorough supply chain management will increase.
Interesting. And on that note, you've just triggered a thought in my mind here, Alex. We did an audit on a big SaaS solution that one would think would be good, real good. And then it had been pen tested, which, having lived, breathed and eaten kind of consumed this for 25 years plus. I don't trust it, because when someone says it's pen tested, I have little faith. I have this different kind of approach, which is, don't just tell me, show me. What is the quality of that pen test? What was the scope of that pen test? What were the true findings? But these things are themselves very opaque. And as we know, there's a real spectrum of providers from, you know, extremely poor to extremely good, but also you need to superimpose a different layer of how much does the client want it to be good as well, and what element of scope is in there. So again, when you're shining your torch in your enabling function, and you take a very consultative view, you want to help business improve with cyber. How do you deal with that, Alex? Because that's so difficult. And I don't know of any specific solutions. It's in a way, isn't it? It's an approach.
I would say there is no standard solution, of course. I think it depends on the one hand of a, let's say, reasonable track record of experience, seeing also the industry grow, seeing requirements coming up, seeing requirements changing. Just to give you an idea, the whole story around GDPR, right? This wasn't expected, I would say, taking a look back 10, 15 years ago, right? But after certain legally, let's say, initiatives, trends, and all of the other key players in this context, I think all of a sudden it was clear, oh, wow, this could be a game changer, right? And understanding this, consulting a company is not just, taking a look at the laws. GDPR, unfortunately, I would say, is an area where it's still up to interpretation for the industries. And specifically in our area, where we're typically offering solutions hosted somewhere in cloud or even on-prem, right? It could be debated in the details. And this finally ties back to, for example, consultancy for what should be in the contracts, because it's all starting with this, right? And when doing audits, I'd say the whole story around privacy management. I mean, meanwhile, we have, let's say, pretty good standards from ISO and others, which are at least giving some kind of framework for it. But again, it is like we discussed for supply chain management. It's all about the, let's say, organization's appetite to invest in qualified resources and really having, let's say, that kind of management commitment to roll out something like a solid privacy management system. And this, again, is, let's say, a pretty comprehensive approach. Could fail if you don't have adequate management buy-in or stakeholder buy-in. It is something that is never finished. It is a continuous improvement activity. I think just one example, nowadays we're all dealing about privacy, with privacy, but I think most companies still fail to understand, okay, we need to execute it or follow it in a way that is really based on a management system.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I've just noted down here now, so I just want to reverse back a bit into something very important you said, Alex, which was, it's all, when you're looking at supply chain, it's all about the contract, and the contract being the delineation or boundary of responsibilities. We will do this, you will do that. I pose a question to you and a challenge. These are great, but as we all know, the implementation versus the intent often is different, whether that be by design, error, omission, whatever, complexity. But hackers don't care. Hackers do not care. Hackers care about the information flow and how to get to their end goal state. They don't care that an organization has done X and outsources to Y and has all these fees in here. But from a compliance and governance perspective, we need to make sure not only are the players in that whole system doing their bit, but they are also joining up to contract and also to the overall system of protection, right? Where does your brain go when you do that? Because I know you're good at it, but it's a very, there's an art around this as well as a science, isn't there, Alex?
Yeah, I think the bringing up the aspect of, let's say, being under attack is a very important one, and I'm referring to management systems mainly because I consider it as a very good practice to have a reasonable understanding what's going on in your organization, and as soon as you have that kind of transparency, it will significantly help you to find the adequate layers of protection. Without knowing, without organizing it in a management system way, you typically tend to have certain focus areas, let's say individual spots, for example, driven by a client requirement and so on, where some business units are well protected, but other business units might fail because they're not falling under the same compliance umbrella. And when taking a look at this during the audits, I typically try to, let's say, sell internal good practices and say, guys, I know we are in a complex universe. We are definitely in an area where standardization is a challenge, right? But we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And companies like yours are just a good example where I'd say with trusted partners, right? It's even easier to serve the idea of such management systems which are finally protected, right? And this is to me still one of the so-called homework issues where I'd say our companies are really willing to invest, our companies willing to show their commitment, but also our companies taking the opportunity and making the best out of that. I mean, it sounds easy, right? But it's not that easy in execution. And I'd say taking a look at decades of experience in this, I would say, yeah, challenge accepted.
Well, this is, you strike on something that is, I probably speak to, I don't know, 4 or 5 CISOs around the world today, something like that. And you learn so much when you speak to these people because they have such breadth, depth, enormous responsibility. And one of the big things that we're all starting to challenge is this kind of responsibility of, well, let's take us out of the equation, but advisory firms in the industry, which is they are very much, as a general rule, all about what do we need to do, and they draw the box and they go and do it. And it's very adversarial, and there's, some are really, really great, some are really, really bad, and everything in between. But there's another element, I think, as well, Alex, that I think ties in with this whole relationship of audit being an advisory function, something that is there to do better rather than just compliance. And I've got a very specific question on this in a minute that I've just noted. But isn't it for providers also to drive a level of responsibility and challenge and say to their client, yeah, you can do that and we can do this. But is that the right way? Is this going to really tackle what you're trying to do? Or are you trying to tick this off? Are you trying to get safety around something, but you haven't opened your mind to the other feeding supply chain systems that are in this process? Where do you sit in kind of like, global head of audit view on that? Because you're only as good as your auditors, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of questions hidden in this. I think, first of all, referring to consultants, external consultants, I think it's always difficult to, let's say, having a fully comprehensive approach in consulting work, because in the end, you're limited to your statement of work. And I would say, based on my experience, consultants that I used to work with, of course, having their deliveries given to the organization, sending the report, and then they're gone, right? I mean, this is probably the biggest problem where I'd say the internal audit function here probably has a major advantage to say we can do more. In theory, of course, we could limit our work to say, okay, yes, we're doing our audit work as mandated. We have the reports. We have raised the hand to say, okay, risk. Okay, absolutely important job. in my universe, I'm basically focusing on doing more, and doing more means really having a thorough follow-up of these actions. I have a dedicated resource in my team who's just doing follow-up work, and she's great. She's really, let's say, literally the pain in the ass to the auditors, and saying, okay, we have a certain commitment, we have due dates, we have a commitment to a set of actions, right? And we'd like to see them finalized. We'd like to see them finished. We'd like to see them realized in a way where we consider them as a sustainable improvement. Of course, I'm very honest with you. Of course, it's not working everywhere. That's for sure. But I think taking a look at high-risky observations, non-conformities in the ISO language, right? Of course, there's a certain expectation that we are reacting within time, right? And we are reacting in a way that the same issue is not coming back again. So the whole topic around recurrence, which in the end, is all about costs, right? Is a value added that I can give back to the organization. So guys, by doing this and following up, and we have hundreds of corrective actions. It's a pretty comprehensive thing. But in the end, the more we can verify, and by the way, also ISO strictly refers to the successful verification of an audit, right? Which is officially the sustainability of corrective actions in the very end, right?
Mm.
By the way, some companies really fail to understand this, but I think that's key, and having that kind of, let's say, motivation going to the final stage, and doing the check mark and verifying, ideally also having a follow-up audit in the same area, makes it sustainable. I'm absolutely convinced on doing this and seeing the success in real life.
This makes sense. I've kind of got two more sets of questions here. Why, when we first started talking, I got the sense, and it was great, that there is doing what's needed and then doing better, and you fall into that let's do it better camp. That's a relatively rare thing, Alex, in this day. We're all busy, bigger, better, faster, more, time deadlines, etc., resources. But why do you think so few in life, and it be in as a third-party provider, it might be as a supply chain, it might even be in audit, why do people fail to strive to do better, to over-deliver, to really think things through and take things on a different, slightly extended stretch? Why is that?
Believe it or not, I've asked the same question myself again and again. Why is it like this? Because I see typically areas, critical areas where we definitely need to improve, and say, okay, you could have done better without me. It's not Alex required to come in and do an audit and then doing all of the analysis, reporting and follow-up work, which is okay, right? But I think, honestly, it's still all about, let's say, resources. On the one hand, it's all about correct interpretation of requirements still. I still see, let's say, deficiencies. You've mentioned qualification earlier, and that's not about, let's say, earning the badges that you need to become an auditor. I think that's the baseline, right? But based on experience and based on understanding audit situations and corresponding professional judgment and assessment and interpretation, risk assessment, all of these things. I think this is something that you can only learn over time. And by doing this, you would also find out, okay, what's the most intelligent way how to pack this knowledge into something that is, let's say, the super nice package for the organization, because it gives you a value. And this is my personal motivation. This is basically triggering me to say, I'm giving 120% year over year. And of course, everybody can say, yeah, you need more resources and so on. Yes, I'm in the same position, everybody, so obviously, right? Once again, I'm definitely trying to invest my time intelligently. Again, it sounds probably easy, but I'm trying to be focused. I'm trying to be, let's say, focus on areas where we have the big picture written down and we see what's going on. We have these cross-sectional views as auditors, and we see what's also the organization's vision and mission. How does that fit? What are the business requirements? What's the midterm to long-term strategy? What's happening on a short-term base? What's the project going on? And all of this thing. So it's pretty comprehensive. And I think it's, again, just confirming why a solid internal audit function should sit in an adequate position within the company, and having, let's say, kind of a tradition of growing with the company, understanding the goals and the objectives, and then doing a better job in analyzing, okay, what could be the consulting work, what could be really the value added in terms of corrective actions that you're finding based on the audit results.
So you've hit a big word that I personally love, which is value. Value, which is sometimes a bit of a rare thing these days and hard to find. But you know, I wrote down here on my pad here, Alex. You know, audit can break down barriers by instead not being binary in its thinking and saying, you know, here is a set of controls, this is what you need to do. Because if you encourage that mentality, then surely all we're doing is encouraging people just to meet the intent of things, which often leads to shortcuts, workarounds. Even if it's good intent, it may not be better and certainly doesn't give value. So that kind of, I've written here, context over compliance instead, you know, context leading here.
Oh yeah.
Compliance, you know, as a minimum. So, and that takes energy, huge amounts of energy that people, perhaps a little bit more these days, don't seem to have. So tying that into my sort of final question here, which is, audit can be, and it's often, everyone associates audit with a point in time, a barrier, a gate, a hurdle, a checkbox, whatever it might be. And that's driven obviously by governance and compliance reasons. But what's your view about taking that approach and pulling it out, teasing it out into a continuous approach as well? Because there's so many interesting things to explore. So just give me a couple of minutes on your thoughts on that, Alex.
Sure. I think it's you've brought up a very important aspect. This let's say continuous auditing approach is still something where I, let's say, like to motivate organizations in doing more on that side. I would say nobody's perfect at this, but of course there's a lot of value because you know, continuous self audits would significantly contribute to detect issues and risks earlier. It would also involve process owners, but also operators, administrators, whoever is in the role to have a fair position to do a self-assessment continuously, right? And this would dramatically help to improve the overall compliance posture. And as I said, it's definitely an approach where you would be in a role to find out things earlier. I think from an overall audit perspective, I guess the approach on continuous auditing or continuous improvement is again tying back on the let's say discussion around management systems. ISO-driven management systems, and you probably found out that I'm a strong evangelist for ISO in this context, because I'm still absolutely convinced if you're doing a thorough job with this, it makes sense to you. And you know, ISO is all about continuous improvement, right? It's not just setting up a management system, it's the continuous improvement aspect. And when I'm coming for internal audits for, let's say, pretty mature ISMSs, for example, I'm asking, okay, what have you done to improve that? That's probably one of my first questions, right? I'm asking, okay, please show me what was the status in the last year and what's the status today? What have you improved? And in many cases, typically the auditing is also referring to previous internal audit reports and say, okay, look at this, we have taken into consideration what you gave us as a list of findings and the corrective action plan that we've jointly agreed on and that we followed up, right? And that's something where I would say it's not just for my ego, right? It's really explaining a little bit the motivation why I'm doing this. I guess you asked this earlier. And I think this is, let's say, just confirming that we are really in a win-win-win situation where we have the auditees, the auditors, and of course the organization as the big winners in this context. And this is, let's say, the value that you were referring to earlier.
Win-win. Love it. What have we improved? Love it. I will briefly go down a quick tangent before we wrap up, because there is something there. You've said, how have we improved? If you think about it, on an ISO 27001 audit, and I'm a 27001 nerd as well, because I see the value in it. But what's the first thing an auditor says? They look at your documentation and look at boring things like, does this tally to this, and is this referenced correctly? And yeah, I guess the standard needs it, but it's the first way to lose your audience, isn't it? It doesn't say, how have we improved? How are we using this as a practical implementation to make us better? Do you think these governance and compliance frameworks, standards are almost, they shoot themselves in the foot on the first pass? And do you think that's the role of the auditor and that kind of context that group and global audit set, Alex, that says, okay, we've got to do these hygiene things first, but actually it's about being better and about improving? Is that an important element for you here?
Oh yeah, I think you're absolutely right saying that typically, audit is somehow negatively connotated, and it's about, oh wow, police is coming in and nailing me on the wall, right? No, it's not like this. I mean, of course, we have certain professional standards. We have requirement to be very, very precise in what we're doing, and we have to be fair. We have to be based on evidence. We should take a look at documentation. If it's not updated, it's not updated. Yes, that's a finding. Yeah, of course. But it's just one aspect, right? And understanding management systems, once again, and I guess ISO is pretty well structured in understanding first the context and then moving over to management. Finally, we're somewhere in operations and doing the analysis, doing performance review, doing continuous improvement, all of that, right? I think that's a fair approach. And if you spend more time in your audits involving executives and they say, okay, what's your understanding of information security? How's your interpretation of this? What is the resources that you're providing? What's your strategy? Sounds so easy, right? I've seen examples where people are somehow not even willing to involve management in their internal audit program. I say, okay, it's probably not the best approach you guys taking. You should rethink that. And the supplier to me then said, yeah, it's so far away, we're a global company and so on. Yeah, but I'm here to do the audit on site. I'm here to verify compliance for the system that you're offering to me as a client, right? So I'd like to make sure that you're also speaking internally with the right stakeholders. And as I said, there could be fears, there could be other hurdles, as you said, to take internally. To be honest, I don't care. If you want to do a good job and if you want to interpret it right, then of course it's the involvement of management that is absolutely mandatory. And yeah, asking the right questions to the right people, is always key, having a successful audit.
Agree with you. So summarizing here, providing challenge, continuous as opposed to just point in time, advisory, a champion for the business, driving value, context sometimes over and on top of, I must stress, on top of compliance, and a win-win for the business through collaboration. Kind of themes that we're drawing out of this, and they're super important. Alex, this is so interesting. You and I are definitely going to continue nerding this out, as I know, just privately. But for the moment, Alex Stangl, Global Head of Audit of Ion Group. Very, very interesting. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dan. Highly appreciate it, and I hope there's some interesting takeaways for the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.